The wind on FOB Dagger was a living thing, a predator made of sand and ice that scoured the high desert plateau of the Ascari Range. It peeled paint from the HESCO barriers and hummed a low, mournful tune through the razor wire. It was a wind that promised nothing good. Sergeant Anya Sharma felt it in her bones as she stepped off the Osprey, the rotor wash a violent, temporary reprieve from the mountain's own gale. Her duffel bag, packed with military precision, felt heavier than its 60 pounds. It was the weight of eyes on her back. They were a fire team from the 2nd Force Reconnaissance Battalion, ghosts in Marpat desert fatigues, their movements economical and sharp. They moved like a pack, their gear worn into a second skin, rifles held with an intimacy that spoke of years in the harshest corners of the world. And they were all looking at her, or rather, through her. She was an obstruction, a piece of misfiled paperwork made flesh. Gunnery Sergeant Rourke, a man carved from granite and cynicism, was the first to speak. His voice was gravel rolling downhill. "You Sharma?" "Yes, Gunnery Sergeant." Her reply was level, carrying no more inflection than necessary. She stood at parade rest, a discipline ingrained from basic, though she knew it looked stiff and out of place here. Rourke spat a brown stream of tobacco juice that the wind snatched away instantly. General's pet project. Figures, he didn't say it to her, but to the corporal beside him, a younger man named Davis whose face was a mask of eager disdain. "Heard she's a POG," Davis mumbled, just loud enough for her to hear. Person other than grunt. It wasn't an insult. It was a statement of fact, a categorization. A box. And she was in it. Sharma said nothing. She had learned long ago that words were ammunition, and you didn't waste them on targets that weren't worth the shot. She followed them to the briefing tent, her boots crunching on the gravelly, rust-colored soil. Inside, the wind's howl was replaced by the hum of generators and the frantic clicking of keyboards. A large holographic map of the Ascari Range dominated the center of the room, a jagged spine of mountains glowing in the dim light. General Marcus Thorne stood before it, his face a roadmap of old campaigns. He was a relic from a different era of warfare, but his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. He nodded once at Sharma as she entered, a flicker of acknowledgement, before turning his attention to the Marines. "All right, listen up," Thorne began, his voice cutting through the low hum. "Operation Silent Arrow. High-value target, codenamed the Weaver, is holed up in these mountains. He's the logistical and communications genius behind the entire insurgency in this sector. Cutting him out of the picture paralyzes them for months." He pointed to a red circle pulsating deep within the holographic peaks. "Intel places him here. Grid 34 Delta. It's a dead zone. No comms, no drone overwatch. The storm front moving in will give you cover for insertion, but it also means you're on your own once you're on the ground. This is a black box op. In and out in 48 hours. Rourke's eyes were fixed on the map, his jaw working. "We can handle it, sir. My team is ready." "Your team has a new component, Gunny," Thorne said, his gaze shifting to Sharma. "Sergeant Sharma is your signals intelligence and logistical support specialist for this mission. She goes with you." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Rourke's face tightened, the muscles in his neck cording. He took a half-step forward, a breach of protocol he seemed unable to contain. "General, with all due respect, she's a supply clerk." The words were clipped, each one a hammer blow of contempt. "We're moving fast and light through terrain that eats battalions for breakfast. We don't have the capacity to carry non-essential personnel." Thorne's eyes narrowed. The temperature in the tent seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Her MOS is 2651, Specialist Intelligence Analyst, with a secondary in Expeditionary Logistics. She has analyzed every piece of intel that led us to the Weaver. She knows his patterns better than his own mother. She is on this mission because I have determined her presence is not just essential, it is critical. Is that understood, Gunnery Sergeant?" Rourke's jaw clenched so hard a muscle jumped. "Sir." "Understood, sir." He didn't look at Sharma. He looked at the map, at the glowing red circle, as if trying to burn a hole through it with his glare. "Good," Thorne said, his tone softening slightly. Now the storm is a monster. Whiteout conditions, wind shear that can tear an osprey apart. We have a 10-minute insertion window. Once you're down, you're ghosts. The briefing continued, a cascade of technical details, ingress routes, and rules of engagement. Sharma listened, absorbing every word, her face betraying nothing. She was used to this. The dismissal was a uniform she wore as often as her fatigues. In the sterile, air-conditioned intelligence hubs of Bagram or Ramstein, her mind was a celebrated weapon. Here, on the sharp end, her body was just a liability. After the briefing was dismissed, the team gathered their gear. Sharma moved to her designated corner, unzipping her duffel. She laid out her equipment on a worn poncho liner, her movements economical and precise. Standard-issue rifle, sidearm, ammunition, med kit, rations. But alongside them were other items. A hardened data slate, a compact satellite spectrum analyzer, 3 different types of encrypted data drives, and a small, custom-built power pack with a miniature solar array. Davis walked past, sneering. You planning on doing some accounting out there, Sergeant? Better bring a calculator. Staff Sergeant Rostova, the team's corpsman, watched from a distance. She was quieter than the others, her skepticism less overt but still present in the careful distance she kept. She watched Sharma field strip her rifle. The movements were clean, practiced, efficient. Not the fumbling of a clerk, but not the fluid, second-nature speed of a grunt either. It was the motion of someone who had learned the task by the book and practiced it until the book was irrelevant. Still, it wasn't enough. Rourke approached, his shadow falling over her neatly arranged gear. He pointed a thick finger at her pack. Everything you take, you carry. Everything we need, you better have. You fall behind, you get left behind. We're not a babysitting service. I'm aware of the operational parameters, Gunnery Sergeant, Sharma said, not looking up from her task of checking the seal on a waterproof bag. Are you? He scoffed. You think you know what it's like out there? Those mountains don't care about your clearance level. They don't care how many reports you've written. They just kill you. Indiscriminately. I'll pack accordingly, she said. Her calm infuriated him more than any argument could have. He saw a clerk, a bureaucrat in camo, who was about to get his team killed. He saw a weakness ordered into his ranks by a general who had spent too much time behind a desk. He saw a woman who didn't belong. He turned to his team. All right, listen up. Gear check in 5. And I want every ounce of this POG's kit weighed. If it ain't mission critical, it stays here. The order was a deliberate humiliation. Davis grinned and grabbed a field scale. Sharma simply continued her work, her expression unreadable. She knew her loadout to the gram. She had packed for this environment, for this enemy, for this team's skepticism. She had packed not just for the mission she was given, but for the one she knew it might become. The weight on her shoulders was immense, but it was nothing compared to the weight of their scorn. And in the high, thin air of the Ascari Mountains, both were hard to breathe with. The insertion was violent. The Osprey bucked and shuddered, fighting the leading edge of the storm. The world outside the rear ramp was a churning vortex of gray snow and black rock. The green light flashed, and Rourke's command was a roar swallowed by the engines. Go! 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 They fast-roped into a maelstrom. Sharma's descent was smooth, controlled, her body absorbing the shock as her boots hit the frozen ground. She unclipped and moved to the designated perimeter point without a word, her rifle up, scanning the oppressive grayness. The Osprey was a fading thunder, and then it was gone, leaving only the shriek of the wind. They were alone. Rourke did a quick head count, his eyes lingering on Sharma for a fraction of a second, as if surprised she hadn't been blown away. All right, move out. Rostova, take point. Davis, you're on Sharma. Don't let her wander off a cliff. The insult was clear. Davis fell into step beside her, his presence a constant, suffocating judgment. Just keep up, Sergeant. 1 foot in front of the other. I'm familiar with the concept of walking, Corporal, she replied, her voice flat. The terrain was a nightmare. Jagged scree slopes gave way to narrow ledges slick with ice. The wind drove the snow horizontally, stinging any exposed skin and reducing visibility to less than 10 feet. It was a physical and sensory assault. The Marines moved with a practiced, grudging rhythm, their heads down, conserving energy. Sharma matched their pace. Her breathing was even, controlled, a stark contrast to the panting of Davis beside her, who was carrying a much lighter pack. Hours bled into one another, marked only by the shifting angles of the barely perceptible light behind the curtain of snow. They were navigating by GPS and inertial compass, trusting their technology in a world that had become an abstract swirl of white. Rourke called a halt in the lee of a massive rock outcropping that offered minimal shelter. "Comms check," he grunted, pulling his radio handset. "Alpha 1, this is Ghost Lead. Radio check. Over. Static. Nothing but the hiss of the storm." He tried again. Static. Rostova was already working on the primary tactical satellite radio, her gloved fingers moving with practiced urgency. After a moment, she shook her head, her expression grim under her helmet. "Nothing, Gunny. The storm's too dense. We're in a total blackout. Back up." "Same. The ionospheric scatter is off the charts. We're deaf and dumb until this blows over." A knot of tension tightened in the small group. Being without communications was a death sentence. Rourke's face was a mask of frustration. He slammed a fist against the rock. "Damn it. All right, we stick to the plan. Navigate by primary and secondary GPS. We should be at the rally point in 3 hours." Sharma, who had been silently observing the swirling snow, spoke for the first time since the march began. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the wind. "Gunnery Sergeant, our GPS is being spoofed." Rourke turned to her slowly, his eyes blazing with irritation. "What did you just say, Sergeant?" "The satellite signal is compromised," she elaborated, pulling out her small, hardened data slate. The screen glowed with lines of cascading code and shifting coordinates. "Our receivers are showing a consistent, steady location drift. The subtle, less than a meter every 5 minutes, but it's cumulative. The signal is being fed to us. It feels right, but it's pulling us south, away from the target vector." Davis laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Spoofed? Out here? Who's got a spoofer in the middle of this hellhole?" "The Yetis." "The Weaver does," Sharma said simply. "His entire specialty is asymmetric electronic warfare. He wouldn't pick a hideout that couldn't be defended this way. He's using the storm as a filter. It weakens the real satellite signal enough that his counterfeit one, broadcast from a much closer, ground-based transmitter, becomes the more attractive signal for our receivers to lock onto." Rourke stalked over to her, peering at her screen. To him, it was gibberish. "My gear says we're on course. The NSAT 900 is military grade. Encrypted. It can't be spoofed by some goat herder with a laptop. It's not a brute force attack," she explained, her tone still maddeningly calm. "It's a signal injection. He's not breaking the encryption. He's mimicking the carrier wave and feeding us junk data that looks authentic. See this frequency oscillation?" She pointed to a jagged line on the display. "It's too perfect. A real signal traversing the atmosphere has microvariations. This is sterile. It's a ghost." Rourke's disbelief was warring with a tiny, unwelcome seed of doubt. This was her world, not his, but admitting it was impossible. "So what are you suggesting, Sergeant? We throw away $1 million of NAV gear and follow your feelings?" "I'm suggesting we trust the analog compass and the paper map," she said, pulling a folded, laminated map from a thigh pocket, "and that we recalculate our position based on the last known good fix, factoring in a southerly drift of approximately 12 degrees for the past 3 hours. That would put us—" Rostova started, doing a quick mental calculation. "Miles off course. Near the Serpent's Jaw." The name hung in the air. The Serpent's Jaw was a notoriously treacherous canyon system, a maze of dead ends and sheer drops, marked on the map with a stark warning: unnavigable. That's where he's pushing us, Sharma stated. He's not trying to get us lost. He's hurting us. Rourke's patience snapped. I've had enough of your conspiracy theories, Sharma. You're not in an air-conditioned cubicle anymore. We follow the plan. We trust the gear. Now get your pack on. We're moving. He turned and barked orders, ignoring her completely. Davis gave her a shove. You heard the gunny. Move it. Sharma said nothing more. She put away her slate, folded her map, and shouldered her pack. She had presented the data. The decision was not hers to make. But as she fell into line, a cold certainty settled in her gut. Rourke had just made a catastrophic mistake. They were walking into a trap, guided by invisible hands, and the storm was only the beginning of their problems. The real crisis was yet to come. They marched for another hour, the world a disorienting swirl of white. The faith Rourke placed in his equipment was the rigid, unbending faith of a man who believed in the tangible. A rifle, a compass, a GPS unit, these were tools with rules. They worked or they broke. The idea of a tool that lied was anathema to him. But the landscape was changing in ways that defied the steady, reassuring beep of the navigation unit. The ground grew steeper, the path narrower. The rock formations became more twisted, more menacing. The first sign of the trap was subtle. A glint of metal, almost completely buried in the snow, caught by Rostova's keen eye. Hold! She hissed, her voice sharp. Wire! Everyone froze. A tripwire, thin as a spider's silk, was stretched taut across the narrow path. Rourke crept forward, his movements suddenly fluid and predatory. He followed the wire with his eyes to a small, innocuous-looking pile of rocks. An IED, a simple pressure plate device. Amateurs could have made it. Davis, get the demo kit, Rourke ordered, his voice low. The rest of you check for secondaries. Eyes sharp, they found two more, equally crude, placed along the logical path of advance. It was almost insulting in its simplicity. Davis, the team's breacher, disarmed them with a practiced ease that bordered on boredom. See, Davis said with a cocky grin, holding up a deactivated blasting cap. Amateur hour. The Weaver's scary ghosts must be on a coffee break. Rourke grunted, a sound of grim satisfaction. He's getting sloppy. Move out. Watch your step. They continued on, the mood lightening slightly. They had faced a threat and defeated it. Their confidence, shaken by the comms blackout, was returning. But Sharma felt a growing dread. It was too easy. The IEDs were too obvious, too simple. The Weaver was a ghost, a master of misdirection. This wasn't his style. This was bait. She scanned the terrain, her eyes not looking for threats, but for patterns. While the others looked down, searching for wires, she looked up. The rock walls of the narrow pass were closing in around them. The wind howled above, but down here, in the deepening gorge, it was strangely quiet. Too quiet. The acoustics were wrong. Sound seemed to die as soon as it left their lips. Gunny, she said, her voice low but urgent. We need to stop. Rourke didn't even turn around. Not now, Sharma. This is a kill box, she insisted. A natural amphitheater. The IEDs weren't meant to kill us. They were meant to slow us down, to make us focus on the ground. To keep us right here. And what's here that's so special? Davis mocked. More rocks. Before Sharma could answer, a sharp crack echoed through the gorge, unnaturally loud in the deadened air. It wasn't the thunder of an explosion, but the high-velocity snap of a single rifle round breaking the sound barrier inches from Davis's head. He yelped and threw himself to the ground, a chip of rock spraying from the canyon wall where his helmet had been a second before. Then chaos erupted. It wasn't a volley of fire. It was a single, unseen shooter, firing with methodical, terrifying precision. A second shot struck the GPS unit on Rourke's chest rig, shattering it into a spray of plastic and circuits. A third punched through the radio on Rostova's back, the heavy-caliber round obliterating the device and throwing her forward onto the snow. Sniper! Rourke roared, diving for the scant cover offered by a cluster of boulders. Contact high. Everyone down. The team scattered, their training taking over. They flattened themselves against the rock walls, trying to make themselves as small as possible. But there was no cover. The gorge was a shooting gallery. The sniper was somewhere above them, using the storm for concealment, firing down at his leisure. Rostova was screaming, not in pain, but in frustration. "Radio's gone. It's gone. Is anyone hit?" Rourke yelled. "Negative," came the replies. The shots had been aimed at equipment, not people. Disabling, not killing. It was a deliberate tactical choice. The sniper wasn't trying to annihilate them. He was pinning them, hurting them, just as Sharma had predicted. Another shot rang out, this time hitting the snow at the feet of the rearmost Marine, forcing him to scramble forward, deeper into the gorge. They were being pushed. "Where is he?" Rourke bellowed, peering through his rifle scope, trying to find a muzzle flash in the swirling white. "I can't see a damn thing." The storm was their enemy's greatest ally. The sniper could be anywhere on the ridges above them, invisible. They were trapped. Their high-tech gear was shattered, their communications were gone, and they were being systematically dismantled by a single patient shooter. The arrogance and confidence had evaporated, replaced by the cold, primal fear of the hunted. Rourke's mind raced, cycling through standard operating procedures. Suppressive fire? Useless without a target. Flank the shooter? Impossible on the sheer canyon walls. Fall back? The path was a death trap. They were paralyzed. The brute force tactics of the Marine Corps were useless against an enemy they couldn't see, an enemy who refused to fight on their terms. In the midst of the rising panic, Sharma was unervingly still. She lay flat behind a small rise in the path, her rifle unused beside her. Her eyes weren't scanning the ridges for a muzzle flash. They were scanning the opposite wall of the canyon. She wasn't looking for the shooter. She was looking for his spotter. Or, more accurately, for his spotter's hide. Her mind was a whirlwind of data points. The angle of the shots, the deliberate targeting of equipment, the use of the terrain, the simple IEDs, the sophisticated GPS spoofing. It was all one coherent strategy. The pieces clicked into place, forming a terrifyingly clear picture. The sniper was a distraction, a tool to fix them in place. The real threat was something else. "Gunny," she said, her voice coming over the team's internal comms, the only piece of electronics still working. It was calm, devoid of panic. "What, Sharma? You got a brilliant idea." Rourke's voice was laced with frantic sarcasm. "The shots are coming from the West Ridge, approximately 300 meters up," she stated. "But that's not the problem. He's a shepherd, not a wolf. He's keeping the flock in the pen. Get to the point." "The east wall," she said, her gaze fixed on a series of deep shadows and crevices across the gorge. "The rock there is shale. It's unstable. Look at the base of the cliff. There's no talus, no debris field. It's too clean." Rourke risked a glance. She was right. The base of the opposing cliff was unnaturally bare. "So what?" he snapped. "So the IEDs we found weren't the primary charge," she continued, her logic unfolding with cold precision. "They were decoys. The real explosives are embedded in the east wall. The sniper isn't here to kill us with bullets. He's here to hold us in position until he can kill us with the mountain itself." A horrified silence fell over the comms channel. The team looked from the invisible sniper on one ridge to the silent, menacing cliff face on the other. They weren't in a kill box. They were in a grave, and the lid was about to be closed. Another shot cracked overhead, reinforcing her point. It wasn't aimed at anyone. It was a reminder. Stay put. He's waiting for the rest of his team, or for a specific time? Rostova asked, her voice tight. "Neither," Sharma said. "He's waiting for a trigger. He's using a remote detonator, but the storm is interfering with the signal, just like it's killing our comms. He's firing periodically to keep us from moving out of the blast radius, while he waits for a clean signal to get through." The revelation was chilling. Their lives depended on the random fluctuations of a radio signal in a snowstorm. They were caught between a patient marksman and a mountain wired to explode. Rourke's training had no protocol for this. There was no manual, no drill for escaping a situation so perfectly, diabolically designed. His certainty had shattered, leaving only the raw, metallic taste of fear. He was out of options. His team was looking to him, their faces pale under their helmets, and for the first time in his decorated career, he had no answer. The silence on the comms was broken by Sharma's voice, still impossibly level. "Gunny, I have a solution." Rourke stared into the swirling snow, his world reduced to this narrow, frozen canyon. The sniper's bullet had shattered his GPS, but it was Sharma's words that had just shattered his entire tactical framework. He was a hammer, and this was a problem that couldn't be solved by striking it. "What solution?" He bit out, the words tasting like ash. He was desperate, and he hated it. Hated that the voice of calm, the voice of reason, was coming from the one person he had dismissed as useless. "We can't go back, we can't go forward, and we can't stay here," Sharma stated, laying out the tactical reality with brutal simplicity. "The sniper has a clean line of sight on the entire canyon floor, but he doesn't have a line of sight on the canyon wall directly beneath him. You want us to climb?" Davis's voice was incredulous. "The west face is a sheer cliff, in a blizzard, while being shot at." "Not all of us," Sharma corrected. "Just one. One climber moving fast using the rock for cover. The shots are coming from a single point. He has to shift his position to track a target moving vertically up the cliff face. Every time he moves, he gives away his location. And he can't cover the entire wall at once. It's suicide," Rourke said flatly. "He'll pick the climber off in seconds." "Not if he's distracted," Sharma countered. "The rest of the team lays down suppressive fire. Not at the sniper, but at the entire top third of the ridge. A mad minute we empty our magazines. It won't hit him, but it will force him to keep his head down. It will fill the air with noise and ricochets. It's a screen of sound and chaos. It buys the climber time." It was a crazy plan, a desperate gamble that burned through their precious ammunition for a chance. A slim one, that a single climber could scale a treacherous, ice-slicked cliff face in a blizzard without being shot. But it was also the only plan they had. "And who's this magic climber?" Rourke demanded. There was a pause. "I am," Sharma said. If the situation hadn't been so deadly, Davis would have laughed. "You? Sergeant, with all due respect, you've probably never seen a climbing rope outside of a gym." "I'm the lightest," Sharma said, ignoring the jibe. "I have the lowest body-to-strength ratio, which is critical for this kind of ascent. And my pack is lighter." She didn't mention that it was lighter because she carried data slates and analyzers, not M203 grenade launchers and extra belts of machine gun ammo. "I can do it." Rourke was silent for a long moment. He was trapped between his pride, his prejudice, and the undeniable logic of her plan. To trust her was to admit he had been wrong, that his experience and instincts had led them into this trap. To deny her was to condemn his team to death. The choice was no choice at all. "Rostova, what's your assessment?" he asked, his voice strained. He needed a second opinion, a validator from his own tribe. Rostova crawled over to Sharma's position, her eyes scanning the cliff face. She was a skilled medic, but like all recon Marines, she was cross-trained in a dozen disciplines, including mountaineering. She studied the rock, the pattern of the ice, the potential handholds. "It's possible," Rostova said finally, her voice grudging. "There are holds, fissures. It's a difficult route, a technical climb. But it's possible. Her plan, the suppressive fire, it might work. It's our only shot, Gunny." The admission hung in the air. Rourke closed his eyes. He had led his men through firefights in Fallujah, ambushes in the Chronicles, and hostage rescues in the Horn of Africa. He had never felt so utterly outmaneuvered. "All right, Sharma," he said, the name feeling foreign and heavy on his tongue. "You're up, but you get one chance. You fall, you get shot. This whole thing goes sideways." "Understood," she replied. She was already shrugging off her pack, stripping down to the bare essentials. Rifle slung across her back, ammunition, a small climbing kit she pulled from a side pouch containing a harness, chalk, and a length of high-tensile cord. It was gear no logistics clerk would ever carry. She moved to the base of the cliff, her hands checking the rock, her mind mapping a route. The Marines watched her, a new, strange expression on their faces. It wasn't respect, not yet. It was a kind of stunned curiosity. Who was this woman? On my mark, Rourke ordered, his voice regaining its command authority. He was back on familiar ground, executing a tactical maneuver, even if it was one conceived by a POG. Everyone find a target zone on that ridge. On 3, we give them everything we've got. 1, 2. Sharma took a deep breath, her fingers finding the first cold handhold. 3. The gorge erupted in a deafening roar. 4 rifles opened up on full automatic, a torrent of lead hammering the top of the western ridge. Chunks of rock exploded, snow vaporized, and the air filled with the angry hornet buzz of ricochets. The sniper, wherever he was forced deep into cover. And in that maelstrom of violence, Sharma began to climb. Her movements were not graceful, but they were efficient, precise, and shockingly fast. She moved like a spider, her limbs finding purchase on tiny ledges and cracks in the rock face that seemed invisible from below. She didn't use brute strength. She used balance, technique, and an unnerving economy of motion. Every movement had a purpose. There was no hesitation, no wasted energy. She flowed up the rock face, a dark shape against the gray stone, disappearing into the swirling snow. The Marines kept firing, swapping magazines, their barrels growing hot. The sheer volume of fire was a physical force, a wall of sound. They couldn't see her anymore, only the empty cliff face and the storm. They were firing on faith. 1 magazine left, Gunny, Davis yelled over the din. Keep firing, Rourke ordered. Give her every second you can. High above, Sharma pulled herself over a small ledge, her lungs burning from the cold and the exertion. She was 50 meters up, then 100. The wind tore at her, trying to peel her from the rock. Her fingers were numb, her muscles screaming in protest. But she kept moving, driven by a cold, internal fire. The sounds of the battle below grew fainter, muffled by the snow. She found what she was looking for 150 meters up the cliff. A small, almost perfectly concealed alcove, no bigger than a coffin, with a clear view of the canyon floor. A sniper's nest. It was empty. A few spent shell casings lay on the ground, along with a high-tech remote detonator. Its single red light blinking patiently, waiting for a clear signal. The sniper was gone. He had taken his shots, pinned the team, and then vanished, his job done. He was never the primary threat. He was just the trigger man in more ways than one. Sharma unslung her rifle. She didn't smash the detonator. That could trigger a dead man's switch. Instead, she carefully opened the casing with a tool from her kit, her fingers surprisingly nimble despite the cold. She knew this model. She had written the intelligence brief on it 3 months ago. She knew its frequency-hopping algorithm, its fail-safe mechanisms, and its weaknesses. With 2 precise cuts from a small pair of wire snips, she severed the power connection and disabled the receiver. The blinking red light went dark. She keyed her comms. Oracle to Ghost Lead. The trigger is deactivated. Repeat, the trigger is deactivated. The primary threat is neutralized. Down below, the firing had sputtered to a stop. The silence was more shocking than the noise. Rourke stood frozen, the handset to his ear. The name she had used, Oracle. It wasn't a random word. It was a call sign. A call sign from the highest, most classified echelons of the intelligence community. An Oracle wasn't just an analyst. They were predictive, almost prophetic, seeing the whole battlefield, connecting dots no one else could. They didn't just report on the past. They shaped the future. General Thorne's words from the briefing echoed in his mind. She is on this mission because I have determined her presence is not just essential, it is critical. He hadn't been sending them a logistics clerk. He had been sending them a weapon, one Rourke hadn't even recognized. "Sharma?" he said into the calm, the name feeling inadequate. "Status? I'm at the sniper's perch." Her voice came back, breathless but steady. "He's gone, but I have his track. He's heading north uphill, towards the target location. He's falling back to his command post. He's leading us right to the Weaver." A new path had been opened, a path born not of GPS coordinates or mission plans, but of intellect and courage. Sharma had not just saved them from a trap. She had turned the trap back on their enemy. Davis stared up at the cliff, his mouth slightly agape. Did she just climb that? Rostova was already checking her medical kit, her movements brisk and businesslike, but her eyes kept flicking towards the ridge. She looked at Rourke. "What are your orders, Gunny?" Rourke looked at the useless, shattered GPS on his rig. He looked at the silent, menacing east wall, now just a harmless cliff face. Then he looked up at the spot, high in the swirling snow, where Sergeant Anya Sharma had vanished. He raised the comms handset to his lips, his voice raspy but clear, stripped of all its earlier arrogance. "Oracle," he said, the call sign a concession, an apology, and an order all in one. "You have the lead. We're right behind you." The journey to the summit was a grueling ascent. Sharma led the way, navigating not by map or compass, but by the faint tracks left by the fleeing sniper and an intuitive understanding of the terrain. She moved with a newfound authority, pointing out safe paths, identifying potential ambush points, and setting a pace that was punishing but efficient. The Marines followed without question. The dynamic had irrevocably shifted. They were no longer her protectors. They were her instruments. Rourke watched her, his mind struggling to reconcile the woman he had mocked with the operator now leading his team. He remembered the way she had packed her gear, the calm precision of her movements. It wasn't the fussiness of a clerk. It was the practiced ritual of a professional who understood that survival depended on details he had long taken for granted. He had seen her as a liability because she didn't carry the same weapons he did. He realized now that her mind was a weapon far more potent than any rifle. They found the entrance to the Weaver's lair tucked behind a frozen waterfall, a narrow fissure in the rock almost invisible to the naked eye. A single set of tracks led inside. The snipers. "He's reported in," Sharma said, kneeling to examine the entrance. "They know we're coming. They've probably prepared a final defensive position inside." "Davis, you're on the door," Rourke ordered, his voice slipping back into the familiar cadence of command. The mission was not yet over. Davis, however, hesitated. He looked at Sharma. "Sergeant? What do you think?" The question was a quiet revolution. It was a transfer of tactical authority, offered freely. Sharma studied the entrance, then the rock formations around it. "The entrance is a fatal funnel. A direct assault is what they'll expect. But the rock here," she ran a gloved hand over the granite. "It's weathered. See these fractures? The entire formation is unstable. The generator for their equipment will be located deep inside, for acoustic and thermal masking. It will create vibrations." "You want to bring the mountain down on them?" Rostova asked, her eyes wide. "A controlled collapse," Sharma clarified. "Seal the entrance. Trap them inside. We don't need to kill the Weaver. We just need to cut him off. Operation Silent Arrow. We make him silent." It was an elegant, brutal solution. It bypassed a bloody, close-quarters firefight and accomplished the mission objective with ruthless efficiency. It was the logic of an analyst, not the fury of a grunt. Rourke nodded slowly. "Davis, plant the charges. Not on the entrance, but here and here," he pointed to the stress fracture Sharma had identified. "We're knocking on the door." Davis went to work, his movements now fueled by a focused respect. The rest of the team took up defensive positions, watching Sharma's back as she monitored a spectrum analyzer, sweeping for any last-minute transmissions from inside the cave. The charges were set. Rourke gave the signal. The explosion was a dull, heavy thud, not a sharp crack. It was a deep, resonant groan from the mountain itself. A cascade of rock and ice poured down, sealing the fissure completely under tons of granite. A plume of dust billowed out, then settled, leaving a new, unbroken cliff face. Silence returned to the mountain, deeper and more profound than before. The mission was over. The storm broke at dawn. As the first rays of sun crested the jagged peaks, painting the snow in hues of gold and rose, a lone osprey appeared in the sky, its rotors beating a steady rhythm against the clean, cold air. The extraction was quiet, professional. The ride back to FOB Dagger was silent. No one spoke. There was nothing to say. The shared experience in the gorge had said it all. Back in the debriefing tent, General Thorne listened to Rourke's report. The gunnery sergeant's account was factual, concise, and brutally honest. He omitted nothing, including his own initial catastrophic misjudgment. He gave full credit for the mission's success to Sharma, referring to her only as Oracle. When he was finished, Thorne simply nodded. He looked over at Sharma, who stood at ease in the corner, her face as impassive as ever. You retasked from your primary objective, Oracle. The primary objective was to neutralize the Weaver's command and control capabilities, General, she replied. Assessed mission success, 100%. The target is isolated, his equipment is buried under 1,000 tons of rock, and he is no longer a factor. Objective achieved with 0 friendly casualties. Thorne allowed himself a small, rare smile. Well done, Sergeant. Get some rest. The Marines filed out, leaving Sharma and the General alone. Rourke is a good man, Thorne said, looking at the holographic map. He sees the world in black and white, friend or foe, strong or weak. He learned today that some of the most dangerous weapons are the ones you can't see. He adapted, sir, Sharma said. That's what soldiers do. Indeed, Thorne turned to her. I have your next assignment. There's a network developing in the Sahel. Later that evening, the wind had died down, leaving the high desert plateau in a state of crystalline peace. The sky was a riot of stars, so bright and close they seemed within arm's reach. Sharma sat alone on an empty ammunition crate, cleaning her data slate. The screen was immaculate, the casing free of dust. It was her weapon, and she maintained it with the same care a sniper would his rifle. She heard the crunch of boots on gravel behind her. Gunnery Sergeant Rourke stopped a few feet away. He stood there for a long moment, the silence stretching between them. She didn't look up. She continued her methodical work. He cleared his throat. In his hand, he held a steaming metal mug. He stepped forward and placed it gently on the crate beside her. It was coffee, black and strong, the way he always drank his. He said nothing. He didn't offer an apology or an explanation. Words were insufficient. Instead, he simply stood there for a second longer, then gave her a short, sharp nod. It wasn't a salute. It was a gesture of acknowledgement, of profound, hard-earned respect. Then he turned and walked away into the cold desert night. Anya Sharma picked up the mug. The warmth seeped into her cold fingers. She took a sip, the bitter liquid a welcome shock. She looked up at the stars, silent and watchful in the immense, dark sky. The job was done. The point was made. And tomorrow there would be another mountain to climb.